You're very welcome to the Women's View, a collaboration between Irish Political Roundup and Confident Women Ireland, where we talk about all women's views. And joining us for the panel discussion, mother and daughter, Julie and Sarah, and Tracy Donegan. Tonight on the show, we will be discussing the what's happening, everything in the media with women. The Scottish court today defining women. We'll also be talking about Nancy Mace, who has really, in Washington, D.C., stopped transgender men going into women's toilets. And then we'll be bringing it back to Ireland with the hate speech, Amnesty International, immigration, and the general election. We'll dive right into it, into what happened in Scotland today and the definition of women. Sarah or Tracy, who's going to take it off?
Sarah, go for it. You're an expert in this area.
I don't know if I'm an expert. It's an ongoing soap opera. Maybe we give a little bit of background on it first, because I don't know who's tuning in for the first time on this topic, but there's a group in Scotland called For Women Scotland, and they've taken a case against the Scottish ministers. And basically it centres on the legal definition of woman within the context of the Equality Act 2010 and its application in Scottish legislation. So the dispute arose from the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act. So that's where they brought in an act in 2018, which aimed to ensure that there was about 50% female versus male public representation on public boards. You know, and you see these initiatives. I know the Women's Council in Ireland has been trying to get the same over here, where you basically say, look, there's an obligation for you to fill these board seats 50-50 male-female. And the Act's definition of woman includes men who say they're women, well, they call them transgender women, regardless of whether they have a gender recognition cert or not. So someone who can just say, you know, a man who can just say, well, I'm a woman, he can, in theory, then, you know, be targeting one of these 50% seats, you know, of this quota. So For Women Scotland, it's a campaign group that campaign on this topic, basically, in lots of areas, but it challenged the definition, arguing that it conflated the protected characteristic of sex and gender reassignment, as outlined in this 2010 Equality Act. And they contend that the Scottish Parliament have overstepped its legislative competence by altering the definition of woman. So it's been going on a couple of years now. It started, I think, around February 2022. And the Court of Session at that time ruled in favour of For Women Scotland, saying that the 2018 Act did unlawfully expand the meaning of woman beyond its scope. And so that was a bit of a win at the time. But since then, it went a bit backwards. And so just to skip forward to today, there was a revised guidance in 2022 saying that a person with a GRC was recognised as female and was covered. And so For Women Scotland have challenged this. And it went on and on. December 2022, another session, you know, upholded the government's position. So For Women Scotland eventually appealed again. 2023, this inner house of Court of Session upheld the previous decision again. So the ultimate appeal is to the UK Supreme Court. And so that's what's taking place at the moment. I think the first hearing was today. Is today the 26th? I'm not up to date on how it went, I will say, and tomorrow. And the central issue remains as to whether a person with a full GRC, a man with a GRC, a gender recognition cert, is recognised as a woman, as female, for the purposes of this Equality Act. And you might kind of wonder, well, what's the implications? You know, why does it matter? Well, you know, within the Equality Act, it discusses sex, and women expect to be able to have certain policies on the basis of sex. So single sex spaces, for example. You know, as a woman, you might say, well, I don't want a man in there, in that changing room, in the pool, regardless of how he views himself. So if the government get their way here in Scotland, they will say, well, no, he's a woman. He's legally a woman for all purposes, and therefore you have no right to object. So the legislation basically it's not sex-based rights anymore. It becomes these gender-based rights, which basically means women are subservient to men. They're men's spaces. Yeah. You know, for those of us that don't recognise a man.
And this is the ultimate thing.
This
the
is the
Supreme
ultimate
Court,
thing.
Yeah.
And I guess you know, people around the world that are interested in this topic in their own jurisdictions are probably watching to see what happens in Scotland, just as we were all watching in Australia when Sal Grover had her case, Giggle versus recently. So it's, you know, it's very interesting for us all, I guess, that are in the trenches here, because, you know, we have a similar problem here in Ireland. You know, we have the GRA, the Gender Recognition Act of 2015, which issues men with a female birth cert if they fill in a form online and say they're not a man. And so, you know, this is of interest for Irish women, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Julie, like, where is this madness going to end? And how do you see it ending?
Well, I think this will be really important to see the way the Supreme Court comes down, because it's really important from the fact there is nowhere to go after this. This will be the final ruling on it. So, I mean, it has implications for us because so much of our law, we look, you know, with something like that. So it'll be really, it's going to be fascinating, but there is a lot resting on this case. And as I say, if the Scottish government win, I mean, you will then have the thing of men being basically be saying, yeah, men have changed sex, that they were, you know, they have their gender recognition cert, and now, you know, if they're going for a job that's for a woman's job or whatever, that they will be able to go for it. So, and I mean, it probably has implications for things like, you know, where people want a female doctor or a female nurse or something like that. Well, you could say, well, he's a woman, you know.
Rape shelters
and all like this. It will have long-reaching implications. And as I say,
it removes women's boundaries. I mean, that's the way I think about it. You know, in life, as you go through various stages of life, you know, from when you're younger right to when you die, there are times in your life where you don't want to be in the company of men, either in states of undress or, you know, when you're getting medical attention or intimate care. And you have, at the minute, you have the right, you have a boundary that you can put up, and it removes that boundary. If any man at any time can say he is a woman, and the law is going to back him up, then you basically lose that right. And there are times, you know, you can remove yourself. I had a row with someone recently, and they were like, well, you should leave. It was that presenter from 2FM that, I can't remember her name, the double barrel DJ from 2FM, and she said, if you're uncomfortable, you should leave the female only space. Now you can do that. Now, I don't agree with her, but, you know, that is an option at the minute. But if you're, you know, if you're receiving intimate care, or if it's a service like in a rape crisis center, you know, you know, these are services that you need. You know, you removing yourself, it's not like there's another one up the road. So it's very distressing, and men are drawn, unfortunately, men are men, and you just open the paper every day of the week, men are drawn to these situations of power and control. I mean, there was a man running one of the rape crisis centres in Scotland, and he was hunting out gender critical women, and he had lied on his application form and pretended he had GRC. He wanted to be around rape victims. I don't care what anyone says. He was drawn to it. So you have men who are drawn to power over women, and that's the fear.
It's the denial of reality, isn't it? I mean, we all know human beings cannot change sex.
Yes.
And we know then there are men who have this say, I identify as a woman. And that's all very well for them. Let them live their delusion. Let them run around in a dress. Let them think of themselves as a woman. But we should not be forced to indulge them. Yes. We shouldn't be forced to
participate,
to lie to ourselves, to say, you know, that's a woman, when we can see obviously that it's a man. And it's the thing of they're quite entitled to think of themselves as a woman, but they're actually, it's physically impossible for them to be a woman because they're natal born men. But why should we have to literally, you know, go against our beliefs, everything we stand for, just to let them have their way? They want to bully us into believing in their delusion. And it's just, it'll be really important, I think, from the thing, it'll go. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I think if it if it goes in favor that the men, may have their gender recognition certificate, but they're not actually women. That's hopefully the way to go. That's hopefully. But I
And I
mean,
think as well, sorry, I was just going to say with them, I think for, for anyone who's listening or watching who's not familiar with how this whole thing has come about, there is still this idea that, but they just want to pee and it's all innocent. And yeah, there might be one or two of them that just want to pee, but you don't have to look far to see what's going on social media with men taking photos of themselves in bathrooms, and the fact that a lot of these men are turned on, they are aroused by being in women's spaces. So just by them coming into our spaces, they're physically turned on. Like, I think we need to make sure people get that part of it. This is not just something, oh, I need, because everyone's had the experience, I need to pee, and there's a long line, and yeah, we get that. But I saw a really interesting meme the other day, and it just kind of stuck with me, and it said something like, I would rather call you a man and see you get angry than call you a woman and see you get aroused.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Wow, that's very
Yeah.
Because that's what they want. It's when that's when they're sending death threats, and when you call them a man, they just lose the plot. But calling them a woman, and that is, as we feed in, as other women feed into their fantasy, they're getting turned on. I'm like, that, like, we gotta see, like, it's a horrible thing to think of, but these days it's like, yeah, that's unfortunately the reality of it. And we've seen time and time and time again women being assaulted and teenagers being assaulted in the bathrooms by men who are dressed as women.
Even if they're just going in there, Tracy, like someone has said this to me before, how often does it happen? For me, it's like men know, every man knows that women feel levels of discomfort with men in spaces where they're undressing, right? It's not like something that you would have to sit a man down and explain to him, in the changing room there, they'll probably be a bit distressed when you go in, right? So any man who crosses the threshold, in my view, is doing so knowing that he is making women afraid, uncomfortable, that they're going to remove themselves. So, because someone said, oh, they're not all predators. I'm sorry, for me, the definition of a predatory male is any man who puts women willfully in that level of discomfort and
it's
distress.
an element of coercive control. It's controlling us because they know we're uncomfortable, but they don't care.
They don't care. They
don't care.
They go ahead anyway.
Their feelings are more important than us feeling uncomfortable or whatever, even though.
And I mean, myself and my mum here are a certain age, but what about 14, 15, 16-year-old girls? I mean, are we really clapping on middle-aged men in heels going into single-sex spaces and making young girls feel uncomfortable, awkward, and scared? I am still shocked to this day that women's groups and NGOs and left-leaning do-gooders from political parties would vilify any woman who questions this. And that's where we're at. It's not even like you're okay with your opinion there, but we're a bit different. It's, you will literally be called a Nazi for not wanting to undress in front of these men. So the Scottish case, I think, is really, really, it feels like a watershed moment that hopefully will go our way. If it doesn't, I mean, I really despair.
It's nice to see in America Nancy Mace, like her.
Yes.
Oh, Nancy, what can I say? Relief. It is absolutely brilliant to see that now. Yeah, and her no nonsense approach to Sarah/Tim McBride.
Why are they always themselves Sarah, by the way? Like, I'm sick of this. It's the same here in Ireland, right? Like, my name is taken. It's like they're actually trolling me.
Yeah, but it is. Yeah, no, it's great with that. And she's gotten so much grief this week, and it's interesting, like, to see the grief that she's gotten from you know, across the, you know, the Democratic Party. I'm like, you know, just at this point, come on, people, you know. But there was another Republican woman today, Anna Paulina Luna. She's after filing a resolution now. So it's just, I mean, it doesn't do anything, but it's put into the congressional records that, you know, women are being, you know, getting death threats when we refuse to entertain men in our spaces, and we're getting threats of violence. Just so it's documented, because you know, we again, it's like we're being gaslit into, oh, that never happens, or you know, be kind. Like, thank you, Nancy, from the bottom of my heart, from women and girls around the world, for just taking a stand, because we've seen this week with what else has been happening in the courts, San Jose State University, where they had the male player playing with the girls, and the other team, then they went to court, and the judge came down on the side of the dude so that he can continue playing. And those teams that have forfeited now, I don't know, I think they're due to play, the next round is tomorrow actually. So it will be interesting to see, will the teams hold the line and refuse to play? Or, I mean, because these are young girls that are losing like scholarships, and it's
such a high price to pay, isn't it? And
yeah.
they far outnumber the one dude, as you say, but yet they're the ones who are having to suffer. It's the thing of women's rights are always secondary to men's, and it's just even the same here in Ireland, like we have with the NGOs going on about violence against women and everything else. And we were during the week there, the Irish Penal Reform Trust.
Yes, we've been at 2 events actually since we started.
And you know, they're giving a thing and talking about prisons and everything else, and you know, the rights of prisoners and the whole shoot. But not one, even though the Barbie Kardashian thing, where he'd been threatening, you know, a man in a women's prison, threatening the female prison officers and everything else, and had gotten off. And no mention of the rights of women to be, you know, not to be in the same prison as violent sex offenders. Just, it's the thing of the rights of women just always seem to take second place, and we just have to keep fighting and fighting for it.
And I've seen interesting commentary on that issue as well, where where they come back with, oh, but sure, the women are being, you know, some of the women are being abused by the prison guards. So, like, I mean, that's your argument. They're already being abused, so let's just allow another level of abuse. I just don't understand it. And again, yeah, it is like women's rights are just, yeah, secondary to men's feelings at the moment.
It's
So it's going to set a precedent. So you think the Scottish court and the Supreme Court, that's going to set a precedent in Scotland, and Nancy May has set a precedent in America, and we all come under America, and we come under common law. So it's going to be interesting how the legal arguments are going to evolve out of this.
Yeah, I would think the thing is with what happens in England and Scotland, not so much Scotland, probably in England, but in America as well, it will filter through here. Like, for instance, in the election manifestos and everything else, there's been very, very little. In the manifestos, there's been mention of the LGBTQ, etc., in a couple of theirs, like in the Greens and in Labour. But in the actual discussion, there's been no mention of it. And even to the fact of Roderick O'Gorman the other night, you were saying that he
usually would put trans in. He didn't. We was talking about the hate crime legislation. He said, you know, color of your skin or being gay. He normally would have said the trans and the
identity,
and gender identity, and he seems to have stripped that language out of his in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 months. It seems
the electioneering,
because I think he's probably reading the room, and he's probably got a lot of feedback that, you know, prioritizing men because they don't feel like men. That's my new way of defining it. I don't even want the word woman used in the sentence. So, you know, putting men who don't feel like men and handing them women's rights and putting their rights above the rights of women, you know, that's that's discrimination for me, that we are discriminating against our sex.
But I would think hopefully as well that things like the Cass report and the banning of the puberty blockers in on the NHS, and that then of course up in the north of Ireland where they've banned them in the same sort of way, that has to, even though our HSE pretends not to notice, you cannot really ignore that. You know, we don't want to seem as if we're doing exactly as they're doing, but it has to influence our thinking. So hopefully there is a little bit of a slowdown or a pausing for breath on all these things, that it's not getting the same sort of push.
But then we have to mention Amnesty UK, Amnesty coming in, and they have stuck their oar in. I don't know if you guys saw this, but they put out a press release yesterday saying that they're injecting themselves into this Scottish definition of the word woman. Quite shockingly, they're doubling down, right? When the rest of the world, it feels like, is kind of waking up and starting to read the room. And they've come out and they've said no, that they, that this is a human right, that the right of men to say they are women, and that they're that they should have women's rights is a human right. That gender identity is a human right, and they're injecting themselves in. Amnesty, I think this will be the end of Amnesty. I really do. I really think that this eventually will destroy them.
Well, it was hopefully might be like Stonewall, because I mean, I think even with that's when the first kickback really did start with the trans thing, isn't it? Like, people were saying, like, if they wanted to sort of wear a dress or, etc., it's when they said, trans women are women, as opposed to trans identified males are just men in dresses. But when they were trying to claim that they had actually changed into women, that's when the pushback, I think, with a lot of women began. And that was only comparatively recently in their argument. And it was Stonewall in England, in the UK, who first sort of came out with that sort of claim. But as I say, it's
But then today we see got the BBC giving, like, what was it, the Footballer of the Year awards, women's footballer, to a dude, another man taking women's medals, and come on.
They trolling us at this stage.
What is the BBC?
Yeah.
BBC is really, and then you have the same thing here with RTE. I mean, what is it with them that they're sort of deliberately trying to...
I think they have a bunch of trans children, in quotes, air quotes. I think from what I've heard in RTE, there are lots of very senior people who, if you look, just look at the political parties. So we have Mary Lou, her brother is a very prominent man who says he's a woman, and very prominent on social media. She makes no secret of it. She talks about it openly. Mary Butler, who's a Fianna Fáil TV down in Wexford or Waterford, she is transitioning her teenage daughter, who's still in school, and talks about it in the media. And so it only takes, Helen Joyce talks about this a lot, it only takes one person like that in an organization who's out and proudly transitioning their child, or who has a trans member of the family, to kind of silence everyone else. And I think that's what's happening in RTE. I think if you look last week at the Late Late Show, where Piers Morgan on, it felt like a setup. The audience looked much younger than any other standard Friday night. And Patrick Kilty was there, and he brought up the trans topic, and it felt almost staged the way he attacked Piers Morgan. And it feels like within RTE there is an agenda, and I would say there's prominent figures with trans members of their family. That's what it feels like. I've kind of heard rumors about that as well. Ireland's a small place.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt with the likes of the Late Late and Patrick Kilty. I mean, he had Juno Dawson on one of his very first programs.
This time last year.
Yeah, and never, the usual soft spin, soft and fluffy interview and everything else. and yet he's never had. And I mean, the classic thing, of course, is Helen Joyce, Irish-born best-selling author, and we love our Irish authors. We love our best-selling. They're usually all over RTE, and yet she's never been anywhere, never interviewed. Her book never mentioned the whole shoot. I mean, it's nearly she's been whitewashed out of the whole thing. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I mean, it's not an accident, you know.
Oh, no, it's not, because I mean we are very proud of our Irish writers. We're very proud of ones who are experts in things. We're very proud of ones who top bestsellers lists. And I mean, she being, you know, the former thing of The Economist and everything else. So she should be up there, you know, that you would be tripping over every time you turn on RTE, her opinion on this or opinion on that, etc., etc.
But I heard it
never.
And instead they platform a man who wears a plastic bag on his face.
I know, for Christ's sake. Why are we still but I won't watch it. I
couldn't that, because I thought
the narcissism of that lad.
But it's so dated.
It's so dated, isn't it?
It's so grow up, you know. It was just I just love to know who thought that was a good idea. I mean, they have these people and they're trying to find.
But is RTE stuck in the 90s? I think it's stuck in the 90s.
I think they're influencing. I think they're using the media to try and influence people and normalizing all this. And it's very strategic in, just like the in media studies, the reality television format was strategically formatted and designed to dumb down the younger generation. And that's how they started to bring in all these conversations slowly into the reality television programs. And it has dumbed down, it's done its job. And from a media background, it's very easy to see how programs are designed. It starts off with just planting the seeds, and then they bring in the guests to normalize it and to plant seeds that this is normal and this is acceptable. And, you know, it's in television. But again, it's all come from Hollywood. And Patrick Keaty, where did he live for a number of years? In Hollywood.
It's maybe, I don't know, the late at one time you would have thought it would have taken controversial subjects. It would have, you know, I mean, they do say it had an impact on social change in Ireland when you had the likes of Gay Byrne or Pat Kenny or whatever, because there were serious conversations with things. Now it's just light and fluffy and vacant. And I mean,
I know, like, you know, this Hollywood, here's you know, that Paul Mescal, great, he's on, lovely. But like nothing serious. It's just celebrities and bum fluff.
And it's not done as well as Graham Norton does it or anything else. Like it's just blah now. I think it's just blah. But it is, I think, with RTE, if you listen, during the week, I've been so fed up of listening to RTE because they tend to be, okay, we've been listening to the election for 3 months or 6 months, well before it was called. And every time you turn on the thing, it's the same topics in the news. You know, it's homelessness, it's whatever, it's this, that, and the other. But they're very, very narrow. I've taken to watching France 24, like they're the French news channel, because they tell you what's going on in Europe. They tell you what the EU is doing, you know, and we are part of the EU, and so much of our policy and everything else is determined in the EU. But RTE, supposedly the national broadcaster, doesn't really inform us on any of these things. I mean, we heard about it during the European elections, but we don't actually hear, you know, what their policy things are, you know, what their EU plans on curbing migration into the EU, what their development aid is doing, I thought to myself, realistically speaking, if you only get your news from RTE, you really have a very limited sort of worldview on the thing. And particularly from an Irish point of view, because as I say, so much of Irish policy now is determined in Europe, and yet we don't ever look at it. And RTE is so narrow that they censor so much, And what they choose to put on the news is what we regard as the news. So, for instance, homelessness every night of the week. Well, we know homelessness and we know that the shortage of housing and everything else, but also we know that it's not something that's going to be cured on a daily basis or a weekly basis. There's stuff in train and everything else, but they don't highlight it. They don't highlight the things like, for instance, there's been no mention of the women going
no.
thing or anything like that, or the women in sport or anything like that that might be any little way controversial. They just same
Not
subject.
mentioned.
Yeah.
Censorship. They're censoring, and it's deliberate censorship, and that's why I left. And one of the reasons I left the local media was because of the censorship. And
So, Roisin, what's going to happen now with this new, is it Irish legislation now about social media posts? I saw something there yesterday or the day before. Whoever this guy was that was supposed to come up with, I guess, what's allowed on social media, because we're seeing what's happening in the UK, people going to prison for social media posts. So because it's going to be, I guess it's headquartered in Ireland or whatever, this is going to affect all the EU countries. Does anyone have any idea of what you're looking at? Like this video could be considered hate speech or whatever,
Social media comes under media law. And even when you think even WhatsApp comes under media law because it's a social media app. So even what you write on WhatsApp, actually, if somebody defames somebody on a WhatsApp message, that could be used against them as hate speech. So, but until they define what hate speech is.
I think, didn't they split the hate crime legislation into two, and they've only passed one, and they've shelved the speech part. I mean, they spoke about this in the debate last night. They passed the hate crime legislation, which basically, if a crime is committed against you and they can prove that it was done for one of the reasons that are listed in the protected characteristics, so such as your the color of your skin,
religion,
or religion or whatever's in the list, then you get a tougher, the person, when they're convicted, gets a tougher sentence based on the fact that they were selected for this reason. And look, I think that it was a bad job in the debate last night, because they had a girl there who had been attacked because of the color of her skin on the Lewis. It was a horrendous attack, and I think it meant that, her being there and all the politicians apologizing to her, and it kind of changed the way the conversation should have went, because I don't think you should be thinking of a single individual when you discuss legislation that impacts everybody. I think you should be kind of looking at the legislation, but they've passed that aspect, which is, if a crime is committed and it can be linked to one of the protected characteristics, tougher sentence. And the bit that McEntee is picking up after, well, she hopes to, is the hate speech element. So I'm not sure yet what that looks like, or if that's going to be different. And yeah, I don't know.
I suppose it's going to determine what government gets in.
Yeah.
The next government, and how they pursue that to the next move.
But and if it gets like, I mean, England has gone now to a sort of extreme of thing that people, for quite innocuous tweets or whatever, have been, turning up 2 or 3 policemen on your door and and actually people being sentenced to jail for a tweet. And
there was a woman sentenced. She said something horrendous and then she deleted it. But she got 2 years in jail, I think.
Yeah, and even that whole thing, and it's just for a tweet and for something like that, you're getting serious jail time. 2.5, 3 years. Whereas
they're doing it to make an example. That Penal Reform Trust hustings that we went to, Mum and I went with
in Dublin the other day,
of women, we went to it, and they were the trust, actually, it sounds like they do fantastic work. They were talking about how they look at so sending someone to prison, yes, it's about punishment, but it's also about rehabilitation. And prison in itself, it's it's not a fun time, and you can go in there and you can come out facing lots of mental health issues because of, you know, the time spent in prison. So if you send somebody who's, you know, for whatever reason, whatever the driver is, puts awful tweets up into prison for 2 years, they're not coming out the same person. You know, it's not going to make them a better person. And then you see criminals who've, you know, been physically violent, rapes and assaults, and they don't seem to get sentences in the same week. You'll see cases of lads walking free and men who are in action.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the thing as well, when you hear, you know, two sides of the debate and the two sides of the you know, the trans topic, you'll never see a case of a woman turning up at a transgender event and physically assaulting someone. It just doesn't happen. But on the other side of the fence, they do. They turn up, they spit at us, they, you know, they throw stuff at us, they throw soup, and Kelly J. Keane that time, they threat, murder, rape, etc. So to see a woman, you know, the statistics around females committing crime are so few and far between.
Yeah.
And to see a woman who put up a horrible tweet being sent to jail for 2 years in an environment where men walk away for actually, you know, physically assaulting and raping people.
Yeah, no,
It just doesn't feel.
And kids too, like what is it like with the pedophiles get a pass? Like they're all getting passes for, and women are going to prison for a tweet.
Have you seen that Judge Nolan in Dublin? He's notorious.
Oh,
Even the petition.
I've signed every petition there is to remove Judge Nolan. I just don't know where that ends.
Seems to have a soft touch for pedophiles. They get suspended sentences again and again and again. And I mean, these are men with. Did you see that one yesterday? He had.
I know he got about 6 years. Thank God. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, he deserved about 16 years.
But he mustn't have been.
Was that the HSE guy? Yeah.
Yeah, the HSE guy, yeah.
But I don't think he was.
It does look like children and women are being voices have been shut down, and saying, and completely women have no rights, children have no rights with what's happening now. It's like we've been completely silenced.
Yeah.
Well, it's mothers that are protecting children and women that are protecting children. But once you remove women from the picture, they come for the children.
Yeah. No, there is.
And that's where we're at.
Doubt on that, the importance of the role of women in standing up for the rights of children. Because I don't, it's not necessarily the thing that all men are bad. I just don't think they think the same way. They haven't got. I mean, you, Tracy, in your thing, men are fine, etc., but they don't have that same connection to children, that same protective instinct, I think, in the main, that women do.
I don't think they see danger. I think if a man sees, a father sees harm being done, you know, he's probably going to be first in the fight, you know, hit someone a punch and sort things out. But they don't have the same instincts around danger.
We have spidey senses that are as soon as you don't even have to look. It's you feel it.
The mother's intuition.
Yeah, it's real. And
that we can suss out a creepy man.
You can.
Yeah.
But there's statistics. I know a lifeguard who told me once. Now, don't hold me to every digit of this, but she said that when children drown, it was something like 80% of the time they're being supervised by their father. And it's not that their fathers are bad men. It's that they don't have the same protective instincts and senses around the risks and dangers. And, you know, because if you take into account, you know, that most of the time it probably is the mothers that are bringing kids to things like the pool or wherever they're going swimming. And she wasn't saying it to say anything, you know, mean. It was just women and mothers, we have evolved that way. We shouldn't have to really apologize for it. It's not that we're being discriminatory against men. We have evolved. They were for thousands and thousands of years out hunting things down to eat, and women were breastfeeding and giving birth and, you know, taking care of babies and you know, whoever else was not able to look after themselves. And that kind of, that's why
it's evolution. Yeah,
it is evolution. I get annoyed with the discussion on the carers and the quotas. You know, who was it the other day who was saying, remember at that hustings, it was Adon who said, you know, it's dreadful how most carers are women. But actually most...
Angus O'Snodic.
Was it him or was it the other fella, the Labour lad?
Patrick Costello?
No, the Labour guy.
Oh, Aidan O'Riordan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
That
he was,
idiot.
yeah, he was saying, you know, that
Julia.
the carers are all women, and you know, and but the thing is, at the end of the day, yeah, it'd be great to think that, yeah, maybe women want to be carers, they want to work in that line of work, just pay them better, for God's sake. It's not that we should force men into being carers, you know, just like we shouldn't force women into being plumbers. You know, we should pay people for the work and pay them well for the work, and things like care work and maternity, midwives. These, because it's mostly women, they've been underpaid and undervalued.
Well, it's like the you know, the National Women's Council going on and on about, you know,
The
the thing
gender
for
quota, yeah.
and childcare, you know, women
Okay.
are really stressed, they want more and more childcare.
Yeah.
Quite an awful lot of women, particularly with young children, just want to be able to afford to stay home and mind their own
Yes.
children
Yeah.
during the first few years. They don't necessarily want cheaper childcare
To go
somewhere
back.
else.
But that's why
But-
the other hustings, when you heard Nessa, the Green Party, Nessa, I can never pronounce her name.
Nessa
She
Hurricane.
kept saying, you know, we need baby rooms so that women can go back to work. Baby rooms, maybe. And I was getting a shiver up my spine. I mean, I remember having little children, and I mean, I had a very busy career. It's not that I didn't want to work, but there were times in my life when the kids were little, I couldn't bear to be parked with them. The thoughts of putting a baby into a thing, it was like an institutional kind of a
Yeah.
thing. She wanted state-run baby rooms. I mean, Jesus, like.
Yeah. No, the
The
majority of
workforce. It's like we have to create more childcare, state childcare, so we can have a workforce.
yeah.
And it's taken the whole family values and the mother's role away from families and putting it into state care. That's my opinion. But I
Yeah.
see happening.
No, and it should be possible that women are allowed stay with their own children, their babies, etc., and mind them and everything else. But it is the thing of that you never hear the National Women's Council stressing that, like, and it's even to the thing of the, you know, with the abortion, I was saying they're going on and on about dropping the 3-day wait for an abortion. I don't think there's I haven't heard any one at the door or on the street or anything calling for it. The only people calling for that really are the National Women's Council. And that is their particular NGO, just, I think, maybe to stay relevant or whatever.
They need to have something that they're
Yeah,
hanging on
and
about.
so the thing is that, you know, if you talk to doctors, if you talk to people, it's not a big deal. 3 days is not a big deal.
Unless it was life-threatening.
Unless it's life-threatening, of course, which is a totally different matter. But it's the thing of them pushing for things because they think women want it, as opposed to what actually women do want.
Again, that is, in my opinion, and what I've been thinking of, it's like it's making abortion an industry. It's politicalizing abortion. And when a woman, you know, is going through the most crucial and most heart-wrenching decision of her life,
Yeah.
to make that decision of having an abortion, and then it's making it into an industry.
Yes. Yeah. And
Instead of showing women compassion, care, and understanding, it's, oh, how can we make money out of this? How many people are going to get involved in the industry?
yeah, no, it is. It's that's it. And even though the figures, you know, are 10,000 a year abortions in Ireland, which is whatever 1/6 of all, compared to, you know, 10,000 abortions and about 60-odd thousand live births. There's still sort of thinking about, you know, extending the period you could have an abortion at one end, and as I say, rushing the 3-day period of thing, instead of, as you say, giving women the time to think, well, maybe, you know, do I want to do it? Do I, whatever, letting them have options instead of rushing them to.
When you said it, that your GP, you were chatting about the 3-day wait, and he had said something like the amount of couples or women that come in a panic, and they don't want to keep the baby, but by day 3 they're buying the cots and they're all excited because, you know, it might be an unplanned pregnancy, it might be a shock, but you know, the answer isn't, you know, I've half an hour, I have to go and get an abortion in the next half an hour so I don't distress myself. And I think the culture at the minute, you know, and I see this with the way a lot of the educational stuff comes at the kids, is, you know, don't let someone get upset. Don't have someone face a difficult situation, you know, everything needs to be numbed down and wiped out, and you know, let's
Yeah.
steer clear of pain, you know, difficult decisions and things like that, and you know, physical pain, mental pain, the hard times, these are things which you will encounter, and actually you're better off supporting people through that instead of trying to, you know, so the 3-day wait for me, you know, I know women who didn't have children subsequently, who had terminations, and now look back and go, well, that was actually the only time I had a chance of having a family, and I didn't realize it at the time because everyone was fast tracking me, you know, onto the boat, because at that time it would have been over to England. And so I don't think it's that everyone will regret it, every woman, or that every woman will you know, choose not to have it, but sit down and say, you know, let's have really big proper discussion, because you know, you'll be facing grief at the other side of it unless you bury your head in the sand anyway. Do you know, if you
Yeah.
go through it, if
You
it's
have
not
to-
as if
You
it's
have
not
to
as if-
think it through. You can't
Yeah.
rush into something like that.
these are
And
big
3 days
decisions.
is not a
3
big
days.
deal in
Yeah.
one way or the other in the thing.
Yeah,
And it is a very important decision.
yeah,
You shouldn't rush it. You know, you wouldn't move house without thinking about it. You wouldn't change jobs without thinking about it. You shouldn't rush into something that could be life-changing one or the way or the other. It's but it is something that they keep pressing for, and I see the Labour Party in their manifesto and also
they
going
got
on.
it as
Yeah,
well?
they've also got it. But it
You
is. it's-
know, what I find really disappointing is, and I hope that the next general election, political parties will have manifestos for and mandates for women and children and family values. Not, I don't think, yeah, you know, they have little snippets here and snippets there, but no political party has a special mandate to bring in things. They talk about local communities now. What about communities all start off with families and children
yeah.
and people? And that's something for me that I find quite disappointing. It's as if, like with the abortion, with the childcare, with the women and erasing women. They even want to erase women out of the Constitution and mother out of the Constitution. It's as if they really want to make women invisible. So and this is what this program is really good at. We are making ourselves visible. We're making stands, even though there's 4 of us in here. I was listening to a podcast by Dr. Jan Harper Hayes, and she said that when she started off as a psychologist, she was a behavioral psychologist and then a leadership psychologist. And she said she went into psychology and then she became a political psychologist because she wanted to make a difference. And I think even it starts off with one woman, then it starts off like it is here with 4 of us in the room. How can we make a difference? How can this women's view make a difference? And I think we have to say, women, you can talk about things in the open. You can start talking about childcare, the transgender ideology, how it's being pushed on children. You can talk about, you know, you can have a career, but you can also have choices and options whether to take a career break, bring up your children, work part-time, flexi hours, or go out and have a full career. But during them times, it should be allowed in that woman's life. There's no societal or political or economic bias where she might have to take time off work and to look after her family. I really would love to see a real politics, women now coming together like we are here and start talking publicly again and not being ashamed or shamed in saying we want a woman's mandate. We want in every political manifesto in the next general election in what should be 2028, 29. We want a woman's manifesto.
A dirty word, Roisin. I mean, that penal reform meeting that me and Mum went to, I had a question lined up to ask, and she at the end, it's recorded online, it's on YouTube, you could watch it. So everyone puts their hand up towards the end, and she kind of points to me as the 4th person. She's like, we'll take these 3, then we'll take these 3, and she was pointing at me as number 4. There was a few of us there, and she took the first 3 questions, then she came back, but something happened I think Helen saw her getting some messages on her phone.
Oh, yeah.
And she took 10 questions in the end and she wouldn't come back to me. Now, I was so well behaved. I was sitting there. There was nothing. I had been nodding at them all
Yeah.
and smiling because, you know, we were sitting up the front. But something happened where she'd obviously got a message, you know, that those women, everyone else there was from an NGO. And when she was asking them, she was like, you know, Pauline from whatever, you know, a Council of Civil Liberties has a question. And I think somebody had said to her, don't let that woman ask her question. And she'd maybe taken my name and cross-referenced against some kind of hit list, I don't know. But I think they knew we were going to ask difficult questions that, you know, because I had a question lined up to say, you know, what about what are the penal reform's thoughts on men who say they are women being housed in with the female prisoners in the Barbie Kardashian case, and, you know, going forward, because during the conversation they talked about a women's prison, that they want a women's prison built, a specialist prison for women, so that they could bring their children there and see their children. And it actually sounded very humane, and there was lots of acknowledgement that the prison experience is much tougher on women than it is on men, because they are the you know, the heart of the family, and the women that are in prison,
the role in the family is much more important than the role of men.
And that it ruins children's lives when their dads are in, but more so when even worse when the mums are in. And, you know, how do we support families better, and women are not in there as well for the same types of crime men are in there for. So this had all been going on. But then when it came to a woman going to ask a question, they knew obviously at this stage who we were. They didn't want to hear that question, you know. So I think woman has become you know, it's okay to talk about, you know, supporting women in some contexts, but there's a line then where, you know, it's only if it fits the narrative that they've already kind of set out for themselves. Do you know what I mean?
I think what the thing is, what we've been attending meetings for these, like the National Women's Council and Penal Reform Trust and things like that. And the thing is, I think strikes me is these are supposed to be part of the democratic system, and, you know, getting different voices being heard by government and everything else. But actually, they are just an appearance of democracy.
Oh, yes.
And every time you go to a meeting that's held by one of them, the only other people at it are people from another NGO
who are allowed to speak.
Who are allowed to speak, and members, the few members of the public, and we're usually there. We're a large number. We might be 25% at it. Well, some of these meetings,
10, 11.
we've been 50% of the things when we went. But you're not allowed to question it. They have a little thing that they're going to say. They're going to say that no matter any questions or anything else. And all these NGO meetings and you know, briefings and things, they're to give the appearance that they're doing something, to give the appearance that they're being democratic.
Well, because they've got their funding, and
because they've got their funding.
Yeah.
But they're just a smokescreen. It's a closed system. Them talking to each other, putting out a prepared speech, not getting any feedback, not taking any questions that will disturb their equilibrium.
But isn't that why, if you look at the referendum, it wasn't just the politicians that got it wrong. The NGOs got it wrong, but also the Citizens' Assembly, because as we were talking about during the week, the Citizens' Assembly isn't a random, as it sounds, selection of citizens. They're hand-picked people from within that very community of NGOs and activists.
This is the people on the actual Citizens' Assembly. They may be randomised, but the people who are organising,
presenting to them,
and are NGOs, and they're picked.
And
the people that present the arguments to them are handpicked. So they don't necessarily get both sides of the argument or the round thing. It's all giving the appearance of democracy and consultation. And now when I hear some of them say about, on both those meetings, the last two meetings we've had, they were saying, we'll have a citizens' assembly on this, and I thought to myself, no, we don't need a citizens' assembly. We elect our TDs and politicians to legislate and rule and everything else. We don't need a citizens' assembly, which are NGOs
telling people how to think,
telling people what they should or shouldn't think. It's a very, I think
it's interesting to see it up
too
close.
Subject. It's too easy to be manipulated, the whole citizen assembly thing, and the NGOs are definitely definitely.
so tight together.
It's a closed shop.
Yeah.
It's a closed shop.
It's like women have been silenced even within the women's organizations because they're pushing the corporate message and the ideologies and everything that's there. And you know, we're running out of time, so we'll wrap up in a couple of minutes later. So give your last what you want to get out on this program. But it's about, and I think that's what I like about the Women's View is we are talking about women's views, what ordinary women are talking about, and we're not afraid to be silenced. And I think that's what's very important, that we and other women who we know in other groups are not allowing, are standing up for women's rights. And I think that's what's really important, and everybody using different platforms to get that message out there.
Yeah, it'd be great to get some women with different views to us, even. The no debate kind of slogan prevents us, you know, it prevents them from talking to women like us. But I mean, I think, Roisin, if we could get people of diverse opinions on here, get a better outcome, because we can see that, look, you don't have to agree on everything with people. And if you disagree with something, it doesn't make the other person the enemy, you know. And I would love to see Irish politics returning to what it would have been. It's gone very, like, I don't know, Tracy, very like the US is kind of the style of like the two polar opposites. It's kind of spread out, it feels like, over here. And you know, if you disagree on one thing, it's almost like, well, oh, you've picked a side now and that's it. You know, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Well, let's see who we can reach out to and have them on. I think that would be really nice to have, and where we can go back to the balance, what media was and should be, a balanced opinions of different people's opinions. Media has become just one-sided. I remember when I was doing my media degree and my PR degree, and even when I was on local radio, if I was having a panel discussion, I would have to have a balance, a for and an opposing.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, you think rather than we've lost that in some of Irish political conversation, and on the RTE and things like that. You don't get a round story. You don't get the whole.
I grew up in the north.
Yeah.
And like I came from a very conflict, diverse, different opinions. And my best friends we were all on different opinions and different beliefs, but we could share and have our opinions. And then we went out shopping, dancing, and everything else together the night. You know, so but I do think I'd love to see that back again, the for, the against, and bringing that balance and getting other people to think critically, because that has been taken out of the media. And ladies, let's bring that here.
Yeah.
Well, we're running out of time. And Tracy, I'm very conscious that you were supposed to be somewhere else as well.
I'm going.
So thank you for taking the time to listen to myself, Roisin the Chleirigh, Tracy Donegan, and the mother and daughter duo, Sarah and Julie. And thank you, Sarah, Julie, and Tracy, for coming on The Women's View. This is exactly what it is, The Women's View. Until next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.